Chronicle of America, few ideas have so powerfully captured the national imagination as that of Manifest Destiny. It was more than a mere policy. It was a profound, almost spiritual conviction. It gripped the heart of a young republic. In the 1840s, this idea was given a name, but its spirit had been stirring since the first settlers looked west from the Atlantic shore. The concept was simple, yet immense, that the United States was destined, by the will of Providence, the virtues of its people to stretch from one ocean to another. It was a vision of a continental nation, a single unbroken republic dedicated to liberty and democratic governance, not an act of conquest, but the fulfillment of a great and noble purpose, rooted in a deep and abiding pride in the American experiment. The young nation saw itself as a beacon of hope in a world dominated by monarchies and old aristocracies. The engine of westward expansion was fueled by a complex mixture, practical needs, profound beliefs. Foremost among these was the unwavering conviction in American exceptionalism, the idea that the United States was a unique nation with a special role to play in the world. This was not simple arrogance, but a deeply felt responsibility to extend the empire of liberty as Thomas Jefferson had envisioned. Proponents argued it was a moral imperative to spread democratic institutions and the principles of free government across the continent. They saw the American system's emphasis on individual rights, representative rule as a superior model for human society. Its blessings shouldn't be confined to the eastern seaboard. Economic pressures also provided a powerful impetus for the westward push. The population was growing at a remarkable rate, swelled by natural increase and by immigrants from Europe seeking new opportunities. The established eastern states were becoming crowded. Nothing exemplified the economic promise of the West more vividly than the California gold rush. The discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill in 1848 sent shockwaves across the nation and the world. It ignited a mass migration. Tens of thousands of fortune seekers, known as 49ers, abandoned homes and jobs, made the perilous journey to California, chasing the dream of striking it rich. Only a fraction found great wealth, but the event transformed the American economy. It injected massive new capital, fueling investment, fueling commerce, fueling industrial growth. The gold rush catalyzed development across the Pacific coast. Before 1848, California was sparsely populated. Within a few years, it became a bustling hub. While the gold rush captured the headlines, the true, enduring wealth of the West was found not in its mines, but in its soil. The vast grasslands of the Great Plains, initially dismissed by some as the Great American Desert, were eventually recognized as some of the most fertile agricultural land on the planet. Driven by the promise of land ownership made accessible through acts like the Homestead Act of 1862, millions of farming families moved west. They brought with them the determination to transform the wild prairie into a productive landscape. With the steel plow, an invention perfected for the tough sod of the plains, they broke the earth and planted the seeds of an agricultural empire. These pioneer farmers cultivated immense fields of wheat, corn, and other grains, turning the American heartland into the breadbasket of the nation and eventually the world. This agricultural abundance had a profound effect on the country. The surplus crops became one of America's most important exports, generating vast revenues and strengthening the national economy. The story of westward expansion is, at its core, the story of the pioneers. These were the ordinary men and women who possessed an extraordinary measure of courage and resilience. Farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, schoolteachers, who made the momentous decision to leave everything they knew behind. Packing their worldly belongings into covered wagons, they embarked on journeys fraught with peril and uncertainty. Scorching deserts, formidable mountain ranges, unpredictable weather, and the constant threat of disease. The Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, and other overland routes were littered with the graves of those who did not survive the arduous passage, a somber reminder of the immense risks involved. What drove these families forward was a powerful combination of hope and grit. They were motivated by the dream of a new beginning, of a place where their hard work could lead to prosperity and independence. They believed in the promise of America, and they were willing to endure almost any hardship to claim their piece of it. This pioneering spirit was characterized by a rugged self-reliance. On the frontier, settlers had to depend on their own skills and resourcefulness to survive. They built their own homes, often from rough-hewn logs or blocks of prairie sod. If the covered wagon was the symbol of the initial push west, the railroad was the symbol of its consolidation. The construction of the transcontinental railroads was one of the greatest engineering feats of the 19th century, a monumental undertaking that physically and psychologically united the nation. Before the railroad, crossing the continent was a grueling 6-month ordeal. Afterward, the journey could be completed in about a week. The driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory Summit, Utah, in 1869 was a moment of immense national pride. The railroads were the arteries of the new Western economy. They carried the products of Eastern factories and transported the agricultural bounty of the Western farms and ranches back to the urban markets of the East. Towns and cities sprouted up all along the railway lines. The railroad was the lifeline of these new communities. It required blasting tunnels through solid granite mountains, building massive trestles across deep canyons, and laying thousands of miles of track across barren deserts and empty plains. The work was done by armies of laborers. Their toil and sacrifice were immense, and their contribution was indispensable to the completion of this nation-building project. The railroad companies became the most powerful promoters of Western migration, carrying the people who would build the West and cementing the nation's hold on its vast continental domain. The movement of people across the continent was followed, in due course, by the extension of American political institutions. The process was orderly and deliberate, guided by the framework established in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. As the population of a western region grew, it would first be organized as a territory under the direct control of the federal government. A territorial governor would be appointed by the president. Settlers would be granted a measure of local self-government. This period of territorial status was a crucial apprenticeship in democracy, a time to establish legal systems, organize counties, and build the foundations of a stable civil society. The ultimate goal for every territory was statehood. When a territory reached a certain threshold, typically 60,000 residents, it could petition Congress for admission to the Union. Residents would draft a state constitution which had to be Republican in form and in harmony with the U.S. Constitution. Once Congress approved and passed an enabling act, the territory became a new state with the rights and privileges of the original 13. This process repeated, the map filling in star by star. Each new state was celebrated, a sign of national vitality and growth. Political expansion showed the flexibility and strength of the American federal system. It provided a peaceful, democratic mechanism to incorporate new lands and diverse peoples, offering a clear path to equal partnership and encouraging stable, law-abiding communities. To tell the story of this great national expansion with honesty, we must also acknowledge that it was not without its costs and conflicts. The narrative of progress and providential destiny that so inspired American settlers was not shared by the peoples who already inhabited the Western lands. For the hundreds of Native American nations, ancient cultures, complex societies, deep connections to the land, the westward tide of American settlement was a cataclysm. It meant the loss of ancestral homelands, the destruction of traditional ways of life, and a devastating decline in population due to warfare, disease, starvation. The story of their resistance and suffering is a tragic and painful chapter in our nation's history. The conflict was, in many ways, a collision of two irreconcilable views of the world. Treaties were made and broken. Brutal wars raged across the plains and across the mountains for decades. The ultimate outcome was the confinement of the surviving native populations to reservations, often on land that was ill-suited for their traditional subsistence. The expansion also came at the expense of Mexico. The annexation of Texas in 1845, the subsequent Mexican-American War, 1846–1848, resulted in the United States acquiring a vast territory that includes the present-day state of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, parts of New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming. For the United States, this was the fulfillment of manifest destiny. For Mexico, it was a national trauma, a humiliating defeat that resulted in the loss of nearly half its territory. Mexican citizens suddenly living within U.S. borders faced discrimination, loss of political power, loss of economic power. In the final accounting, manifest destiny was the idea that built a continental nation. It was a vision, powerful and compelling, that propelled the United States from an Atlantic republic to a world power. It was a story written not by a single author, but by millions of individuals, the pioneers, the farmers, the railroad builders, the miners, the townspeople, who through their collective effort transformed a continent. Their legacy is etched into the landscape itself. In the farms that checker the Great Plains, the cities that dot the Pacific coast, the ribbons of road and rail that bind the nation together. They built a country of immense scale and scope, a testament to what a people can achieve when driven by a great and unifying purpose. The spirit that animated the Westward movement, optimism, resilience, a relentless drive for self-improvement, became deeply embedded in the American character. It is a spirit that looks to the horizon with hope, that sees challenges not as barriers but as opportunities, that believes in the possibility of a better future. The spirit of the pioneers, that bold, hopeful and forward-looking spirit, remains our most precious inheritance and calls us to continue building a nation worthy of our highest aspirations.